On November 2, 1920, the town of Ocoee, Florida, became the site of one of the most violent and least remembered racial massacres in American history. What began as a day of civic participation ended in bloodshed, terror, and the near erasure of a thriving black community. The early 20th century saw a burgeoning African-American community in Ocoee. Black residents owned land, operated businesses, and were active in civic life. Despite the oppressive Jim Crow laws of the South, they sought to exercise their right to vote, a right guaranteed by the 15th Amendment but systematically suppressed through intimidation and violence. On that fateful election day, Moses Norman, a black man and prosperous landowner, attempted to vote but was turned away. He returned later with a shotgun, determined to cast his ballot. This act of defiance was met with swift and brutal retaliation. A white mob formed, seeking to punish Norman and any others who dared challenge the status quo. The mob's fury culminated in the lynching of July Perry, a friend of Norman's and another prominent black landowner. Perry was dragged from his home, beaten, shot, and hanged from a light pole in Orlando. The violence didn't stop there. White rioters descended upon the black neighborhoods of Ocoee, burning homes, churches, and schools. At least 25 black homes were destroyed, and numerous residents were killed or forced to flee. As dusk settled over Ocoee on November 2, 1920, the town's black residents, already on edge from the day's events, braced for the unknown. The earlier attempt by Moses Norman to vote, followed by the violent retaliation against July Perry, had ignited a firestorm of racial hatred. The white mob, fueled by anger and a desire to suppress black political participation, was not yet finished. Word spread rapidly among the white community that black residents were arming themselves and preparing to retaliate. This rumor, though unfounded, served as a catalyst for further violence. By nightfall, a mob of over 200 white men, some reportedly affiliated with the Ku Klux Klan, had assembled, intent on eradicating the black presence in Ocoee. The mob descended upon the northern part of Ocoee, where the majority of black residents lived. They set fire to homes, churches, and schools, shooting at anyone who attempted to flee the flames. Families were forced to run for their lives, some seeking refuge in nearby swamps and orange groves, while others were gunned down in the streets. The violence was indiscriminate and brutal, leaving a trail of death and destruction in its wake. Among the victims were Maggie Genlack and her pregnant daughter, who died while hiding in their home, which was set ablaze. Roosevelt Barton, another resident, was shot as he tried to escape from a burning barn. The exact number of black residents killed that night remains unknown, with estimates ranging from 30 to over 80. In the aftermath, the black population of Ocoee was effectively eradicated. Survivors were driven out, their properties seized without compensation. For decades, the massacre was omitted from history books, and the town remained all white well into the late 20th century. In the wake of the Election Day violence in Ocoee, Florida, the black community faced not only immediate devastation, but also long-term displacement and erasure. The massacre resulted in the deaths of numerous African-American residents, the destruction of their homes, churches, and schools, and the complete expulsion of black citizens from the town. Properties were seized without compensation, and Ocoee became a sundown town where black people were unwelcome after dark. Survivors fled to nearby communities, such as Orlando and Apopka, seeking refuge from the violence. Many left behind land and possessions, unable to reclaim them due to threats and systemic barriers. The loss of property and generational wealth had lasting impacts on the descendants of those who were forced to flee. For decades, the events of the Ocoee massacre were omitted from history books and public discourse. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries that efforts were made to acknowledge and educate the public about this dark chapter in American history. In 2019, a historical marker was placed in Ocoee to honor the victims, and in 2020, Florida passed legislation requiring the massacre to be taught in schools. For decades, the Ocoee Massacre of 1920 remained a suppressed chapter in American history. The black residents who survived were forced to flee, their properties seized, and their stories silenced. It wasn't until the late 20th and early 21st centuries that efforts to acknowledge and address this atrocity gained momentum. In 2019, a significant step was taken when a historical marker honoring July Perry, a prominent black landowner who was lynched during the massacre, was unveiled in Heritage Square outside the Orange County Regional History Center. This marker served as a public acknowledgement of the violence that occurred and the lives lost. The following year, in 2020, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed legislation mandating that the Ocoee Massacre be included in the state's public school curriculum. This law aimed to ensure that future generations would learn about this dark episode in Florida's history, fostering awareness and understanding. Despite these strides, efforts to provide reparations to the descendants of the massacre's victims have faced challenges. State Senator Randolph Bracy introduced Senate Bill 8 in 2020, proposing a $10 million compensation fund for the descendants. However, the bill did not pass, highlighting the complexities and resistance often encountered in reparations discussions. Nevertheless, some progress has been made. In 2021, Florida established a scholarship program for descendants of the Ocoee Massacre victims, providing educational opportunities as a form of restitution. While not a comprehensive solution, this initiative represents a tangible effort to address the long-standing injustices faced by the affected families. The journey toward full recognition and reparative justice for the Ocoee Massacre continues. As awareness grows and conversations about historical racial violence become more prominent, the hope remains that the stories of those who suffered will not only be remembered, but will also lead to meaningful change.